A man of somewhat common sensibility once said to me, "Where does this contempt for our animal natures come from?" I see it as ego in disguise. One feels contempt for part of oneself because it stands in the way of being better than others. Why do you think excellence must necessarily include a contempt for aspects of our animal nature? Why should such a contempt be a prerequisite to the achievement of an excellence? Why can't an obsession to know simply ignore what's regarded as the animal in us? Why can't our relationship with a herd be irrelevant? Why not just accept what we are and go from there? My response is this. In evolutionary terms, it's clear enough that we are different from other animals. We're different in the sense that we possess self-awareness and the ability to reason in a conscious, deductive manner. We nevertheless remain closely linked to our animal heritage by the very fact of that heritage, and also by virtue of the limited development of our self-awareness. We are still very much animals. In some individuals, the drive to fulfill the destiny that difference indicates is such that they are compelled to view their animal natures as something to be outgrown and overcome. It doesn't mean necessarily having contempt for it, although whilst one still possesses a great deal of ego, it is to be expected. But it does mean viewing it as a negative property of one's nature. And what do I mean by fulfilling our destiny? Simply that we strive to become fully human and fully conscious of our self-nature, which necessitates becoming conscious of the nature of reality itself. Self-awareness creates an inquiring mind, a mind that needs to complete itself and, in some sense, become final. A mind that does not find such completion is one which exists in a constant state of conflict and angst, and is driven by desires it does not even understand, or that it cannot successfully satiate. But what of those who constitute the vast majority of human beings, those who do not feel any such drive? What of those who are apparently content with their animal nature and their lack of consciousness? Why should we adopt a prescriptive attitude towards them? The answer is simple. Such ones are simply too unconscious to appreciate their own foolishness. And what makes them foolish? Again, the answer is all too simple. People fail to see that the universal desire humans express to be rid of their suffering, their confusions, their fears, anxieties, and insecurities, can only be sublimated by way of an understanding of reality. That is, by the complete and final consummation of our difference from other animals. Such desires demand that fulfillment by way of bringing our consciousness in line with what is ultimately true. It is therefore essentially idiotic for anyone to deny the necessity of the quest for enlightenment. The only persons who can do this are those that are too ignorant to see the logical connections, and whose lives are rendered incoherent because of it. It is only those whose ignorance blinds them to the glaring fact that their suffering is entirely a consequence of their animal natures, of their lack of drive to fulfill the promise of the one thing that differentiates us from other species, that is, reason and the level of consciousness that reason may afford us. It seems a little strange then for anyone to ask why we would have contempt for our animal natures. Do we not, at least in the beginning, have contempt for that which causes us to suffer? Of course we do. But because of our ignorance, we do not know where to direct that contempt. Unfortunately, out of ignorance, we tend to toss our contempt up into the swirling winds of egotistical whimsy and care little for the injustices that ensue. Our contempt, we believe, wherever directed, is legitimate because our suffering is not. As my antagonist suggested, it may be that part of our contempt for our animal natures is that it is something that unites us and places us all on a kind of level playing field, whence we must construct artificial edifices of valuation so as to grant us the ability to judge ourselves against others. But it would be altogether cynical and unreasonable to see every expression of disregard for our animality as being of that nature. Some of us are evolved enough to see what is true and what is necessary in terms of the fate nature has imposed on us. In Buddhist parlance, it is quite aptly known as having been born into the human realm.